The dog came in pulling hard against the leash, and the first thing Blythe Carver noticed wasn't the animal. It was the man on the other end of it. He was tall, built the way men were built when the government paid for it, and he wore his ACUs like a second skin. The patches on his shoulder told her plenty before he even opened his mouth. 75th Ranger Regiment, 3 combat deployments worth of hash marks on his sleeve. He had the kind of jaw that looked like it had never held anything softer than a clenched opinion, and when he walked through the door of Riverside Animal Hospital, he did not look at the reception desk. He looked at every exit first. Military instinct, she recognized it. The dog was a Belgian Malinois, male, about 4 years old, maybe 80 pounds of lean muscle and learned aggression. His coat was sand and black, and his eyes were amber and hard and constantly moving. Even from across the room, Blythe could see the tension in his haunches, the way he kept his body a half step behind his handler, waiting. Coiled and ready, the way those dogs always were, the way they'd been made. His name, according to the chart Keeley had handed her 2 minutes ago, was Sentry. Captain Ferris had already spoken to the receptionist, and Blythe could see the way Keeley's shoulders had gone stiff, the way they always did when someone decided the front desk was beneath them. "I need to see the senior vet," he said, "not a tech, the actual doctor." Keeley was explaining, patiently, that Dr. Abrams was finishing with another patient and would be out in about 10 minutes. Blythe watched Ferris absorb this information with the expression of a man who considered 10 minutes a personal insult. She clipped her chart to her hip and walked over. Sentry saw her first. The dog's ears rotated toward her like satellite dishes, tracking her movement before Ferris had even registered she was there. His eyes locked onto her and held. "Hi," Blythe said. She kept her voice easy, unhurried. "I'm Blythe. I'm Dr. Abrams's head tech, and I can start getting Sentry's vitals while you wait. It'll speed things up once the doctor's ready." Ferris looked at her for exactly 2 seconds, the kind of look that measured and filed in one motion. "Don't touch him," he said. Not rude, not quite, more like factual, the way someone said the road is icy or the current is strong, an observation delivered as a warning, which was its own kind of dismissal. "He's a working dog," Ferris continued. "He doesn't interact with strangers. It's not about being difficult. He's trained not to accept handling from anyone outside his unit. You get too close, he'll react." The implication sat clean and clear between them. "This is not for you." "Understood," Blythe said. "I'll keep my distance." She sat down on the bench along the wall, not beside Ferris, but within Sentry's eye line, and opened the chart. The dog watched her settle. His ears didn't drop. Something in his posture shifted, some small adjustment she'd learned to read years ago when reading it had been her whole job. Ferris sat down across from her and pulled out his phone. Blythe made notes without looking at Sentry again. She was aware of him the way you were aware of weather, peripherally, constantly, waiting. Sentry's presenting issue was a forelimb lameness that had developed after a training exercise, possible soft tissue injury, possible something more serious. X-rays were already ordered. She wrote it all down and kept her eyes on the paper and let the silence work. She'd put a small amount of lavender oil on her wrist that morning. She did it every morning she worked. Not for the smell, exactly, but because it was something her trainer at Lackland had taught her years ago. "Working dogs don't trust what they can't read," he'd said. "Give them something consistent. Something that tells them I'm the same person every single time." She'd done it so long it was reflex now, like checking her badge or tying her left boot first. She didn't know, on any given morning, which dog it would matter to. From the corner of her vision, she could see Sentry's nose working. "How long have you worked here?" Ferris asked, without looking up from his phone. The question was calibrated to sound casual. It wasn't. 6 years, Blythe said. He made a small sound, not dismissive exactly, more the sound of a man doing math that wasn't resolving the way he expected. Sentry had moved 3 inches in her direction. Ferris hadn't noticed yet. "Is there a reason you specifically requested the doctor?" Blythe asked. She kept her voice neutral. "I ask because I can do most of the preliminary workup before he comes in. Saves everyone time, including you." Ferris looked up from his phone. He looked at her the way people sometimes looked at someone they'd underestimated and hadn't yet decided whether to revise or dismiss. No offense, he said, but Sentry's not your average patient. His training makes him unpredictable sometimes with people he doesn't know. I'd rather have someone with experience handling a dog like this. Makes sense, Blythe said. She turned back to the chart. Sentry had moved another inch. What kind of experience did you have in mind? She asked, conversationally, like she was asking about traffic on I-95. Ferris set his phone down. Military working dog experience. Someone who understands how these dogs are trained, the command structure, the drives they're conditioned for, the way their handler relationship functions. Not just general animal handling. He gestured, briefly, at the room. The implication was precise and complete, not just this. Blythe wrote something in the chart. Then she put the pen down and looked at Sentry. The dog was still watching her, had been watching her the whole time. She said quietly in German, Platz. Sentry sat down. Not slowly, not reluctantly. He folded himself to the floor with the clean precision of a dog who had heard that word 10,000 times, and he looked up at Blythe with an expression that was almost. In the way that dogs could sometimes be almost relieved. The room went quiet in a specific way. Ferris had gone completely still. Blythe kept her voice the same easy register it had been since he walked in. I was a canine trainer at Lackland for 4 years before I transitioned to civilian vet tech work. Belgian Malinois, Dutch Shepherds, German Shepherds, detection and patrol mostly. The command structure you use is Schutzhund-based, standard for Ranger canine units. She looked at him steadily. I know the dogs. Ferris said nothing. Sentry stood up, crossed the waiting room floor, and pressed the top of his broad, sand-colored head against Blythe's knee. It was not a thing trained dogs did, not with strangers, not in unfamiliar environments with strange smells and a handler present. It was the kind of thing a dog did when he recognized something in a person, some quality of steadiness or safety or competence or some combination of all three that animals felt before people named it and decided, on his own authority, to acknowledge it. Ferris watched it happen. Something moved through his face that he didn't quite catch in time. Blythe put her hand on the back of Sentry's neck, just behind his ears, the way you did with a dog who needed to know you knew what you were doing. The dog exhaled through his nose. His haunches dropped, weight shifting back, trusting. He's been compensating on that foreleg for a while, Blythe said, her hand moving carefully down toward the affected leg. Sentry stood still and permitted it. Longer than the training exercise, I'd guess. You probably noticed it get worse because the intensity increased, but I'd put this at least 3 weeks old, maybe longer. Ferris stood up and crossed the room and crouched down, and now he and Blythe were at eye level with each other beside the dog, and the certainty that had been sitting on him like armor when he walked in had gone somewhere else entirely. He hasn't let anyone touch that leg, Ferris said. His voice was quieter than it had been. Not me, not our unit vet. I had to carry him to the truck this morning. He growled at me when I tried to lift him. A pause. He's never done that. He's in pain, Blythe said. Pain makes them protective of the injury site. Even with their handlers, especially with their handlers sometimes, because the handler is the one who asks them to keep working. She kept her hands moving in small, deliberate strokes along Sentry's flank, and the dog leaned into her the way water found its level. He's not being difficult. He's trying to protect something that hurts because he doesn't know yet who to trust with it. Ferris was looking at his dog. I've had him 3 years, he said. I know, Blythe said. She'd read the chart. He'd trust you with his safety. That's different from trusting someone with his pain. It was a quiet thing to say, and she said it quietly, and she watched it land somewhere in Ferris's expression that he'd probably rather she hadn't seen. Neither of them said anything for a moment. I owe you an apology, Ferris said finally. The edge in his voice was gone entirely, and what was underneath it was rougher and more real. I came in here and assumed you were. He stopped. Tried again. I assumed you couldn't handle him. That wasn't a fair call. Blythe looked at him evenly. You were protecting your dog, she said. I've seen worse reasons for making assumptions. Still, he said. She nodded. Let it settle the way things settled when they were meant to. Dr. Abrams came out from the back hall then, reading from his own chart, and stopped when he saw Sentry pressed against Blythe's leg with the quiet certainty of a dog who had made his assessment and was done deliberating. "Well," the doctor said. He looked at Blythe, then at Ferris, then back at the dog. "I see introductions have been made." Ferris looked at Blythe. There was something in his face, not quite a smile, not quite a concession, but some combination of both that she thought he probably didn't let out very often. "Yeah," he said, "they have." The X-rays came back 40 minutes later. Blythe sat with Ferris in the exam room while Dr. Abrams walked them through the imaging. A partial flexor tendon tear, early stage, the kind of injury that was entirely treatable if they didn't push it. 8 weeks of restricted activity, a custom brace, a rehabilitation protocol. Manageable. Blythe would handle the rehab consultations. Ferris asked good questions. He'd done his research, or he'd lived close enough to this dog long enough that he'd learned what he needed to know. He listened when Abrams spoke, and he listened when Blythe spoke, which was a different thing than how he'd come in. And she noted the difference without dwelling on it. She was used to the recalibration. The moment when a person understood that what they'd thought they were looking at was something else entirely. Sentry stayed at her feet for the entire consultation. After Dr. Abrams left to write up discharge instructions, Ferris sat back in the chair and looked at his dog. "How'd you end up here?" he asked, "after Lackland?" The question was personal, and he probably knew it and had asked anyway. She decided it was his version of an olive branch. "I got hurt," she said, "3rd year in. One of our patrol dogs got out of his kennel during a night drill. Not one of my animals, but I was in the wrong place. He went for my arm." She held up her left forearm. The scar ran from her wrist to the crease of her elbow, silver pink and long since settled into her skin. "Out for 4 months. When I was cleared to return, the position had been filled, and I could have transferred, but by then—" She paused. "I'd started thinking about what else I could do with what I knew. So I finished my vet tech certification and came at it from this direction." Ferris looked at the scar for a moment without comment. "Do you miss it?" he asked. Blythe looked at Sentry, who was watching her with the amber intensity that Malinois carried everywhere, that vigilant, restless intelligence that made them simultaneously the finest working dogs in the world and the most relentless. "Every single day," she said, "but I still get the dogs." Something moved across Ferris's face. Recognition, maybe, or the particular understanding that passed between people who had given something up and found their way back to it sideways. He leaned down and put his hand on top of Sentry's head. The dog leaned into it without looking away from Blythe. "He likes you better than me right now," Ferris said. There was no bitterness in it. Just the plain fact, offered plainly. "He'll go back to you," Blythe said. "That bond doesn't break. But right now he can tell I'm not afraid of what I'm going to find, and that matters to him more than familiarity." She rubbed slowly behind Sentry's ears. The dog closed his eyes for 2 seconds, pure and complete. Pain is terrifying for them. They don't understand it. They just know it hurts, and they don't know when it'll stop, and they have no way to tell you any of it. She kept her hand moving in slow circles. He needed someone to tell him it was going to be okay. Ferris watched his dog with an expression she suspected he didn't know was on his face. "Is it," he asked, "going to be okay? If you follow the protocol exactly and you don't push him back to work before he's ready?" She met his eyes. "Yes, he's going to be fine." Keeley knocked and brought in the discharge packet. Ferris took it and read through it carefully, and his posture was different now in ways she didn't try to catalog, just noted, the way you noted weather changing. A man who had come in scared for his dog and was leaving relieved and was honest enough to let it show. At the door, he stopped. Sentry was at his side in perfect position, attention forward, ready. Handler and dog moving in the easy rhythm of 2 creatures who had learned each other over years of distance and weight. But the dog turned his head back toward Blythe once. The amber eyes held for a moment. She raised 2 fingers in a small gesture. The kind of thing you did between handlers, between people who spoke the same language without needing to explain it. Sentry's tail moved once, just once, and he turned back toward Ferris. "Thank you," Ferris said. He said it the way people said things they meant and were unpracticed at saying, "for all of it, not just the—" He stopped. "All of it." Bring him back in 2 weeks, Blythe said. I'll check the brace fit. He said he would. She believed him. She watched them through the glass doors, the tall soldier and his dog, moving together across the parking lot in the long light of the afternoon, and she stood there just long enough to see Ferris reach down and put his hand on top of Sentry's head as they walked. Then she picked up her chart and turned back toward the hallway and the next patient waiting. She had always known this about the work. You didn't need to see the whole story to recognize when a piece of it had ended right. The dog had been scared and now he wasn't. The man had been wrong and knew it. The injury had a name and a path forward. It was enough. It was on most days exactly enough.